Morning.
Morning. Morning.
Everybody backed out on the scripture reading, so I'll do it myself. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verses 1 through 4. There was a Benjaminite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish. Kish, the son of Abiel, was the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah, the son of Benjamin. That's why they didn't want to read it. He had a son named Saul, an impressive young man, without equal among the Israelites, a head taller than any of the others. Now the donkeys belonging to Saul's father Kish were lost, and Kish said to his son, "Saul, take one of the servants with you and go look for the donkeys." So he passed through the hill country of Ephraim, through the area around Shalisha, but they did not find them. They went up to the district of Shalim, but the donkeys were not there. Then he passed through the territory of Benjamin, but he did not find them. We get a little bit of idea of a background of Saul in our reading today and his heritage. Saul's family was one of standing, one of power. People knew who they were. Now, this would put a type of pressure on Saul to continue this heritage and pass it on to his own children. But he also had a responsibility to keep the family image up, if you will, in the community. I mean, that was just something you did. You didn't want to be a letdown to the family within the community in the ancient Near East. Obviously, from the pedigree we read about Saul and his family, he was destined to do great things. And we know that God had decided that he would do great things. Saul's assignment from the text probably doesn't fit into the category of great things. You see, Saul, after Kish loses his donkeys, Saul is told to go find the donkeys. Look again at verse 3, 1 Samuel 9. Kish said to his son Saul, "Take one of the servants with you and go and look for the donkeys." First of all, we need to understand that donkeys at this time were of little or no value. And since Saul has come from a family of standing, relatively rich, this kind of gives you the idea of how degrading this command from his father might be. The farmers that used donkeys, they were poor. I mean, if you had donkeys or used donkeys to farm, you were poor, and people knew that. Donkeys were used to carry heavy burdens for those that didn't own an ox cart or own any oxen. They were often associated with, and still are, as contemptible beings. I can imagine Saul thinking, why can't the servants go do this? Why do I have to go? This is beneath me. After all, I'm the son. I'm the son. Put yourself in Saul's place for a minute. Have you ever been asked to do a demeaning job? Or a job that you felt was demeaning? Back in verse 2 it said, Kish had a son named Saul, an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites. A head taller than any of the others. He was without equal, but now he's being regulated to go finding donkeys. Sometimes we have to do menial tasks, don't we? Sometimes we have to do the things that nobody else wants to do. I mean, but here is Saul. He knows how powerful how influential his family is. He understands his heritage. He knows he has virtually unlimited talent and potential to be great. And his father says, go look for the donkeys. Go look for these useless beings. He probably didn't need them. They weren't that much value to him. So the question is Saul overqualified? Do you ever do jobs you're overqualified for? Yeah, we do. We do jobs we're overqualified for. I mean, when you think about what's happening here, there's a lot greater things that Saul could be doing. I mean, this is equivalent to going to a world-renowned heart surgeon and asking him to fix your ingrown toenail. That's about what it amounts to. Or taking a PhD with a great scientific mind and asking them to teach preschool. Not that they couldn't or shouldn't do it, but that's far beneath what they're capable of doing. And sometimes in our minds, we get thinking like that when we're asked to do jobs that we don't see as important. I mean, just think when it comes to serving people, to doing things for people. I watched my wife one afternoon rub the feet of an elderly lady in the emergency room for 4 hours. And this was not a nice lady. But she did that. And just as a side note, my wife don't care for feet. But for 4 hours, she put herself in that position. And she did that. God will often ask us to do things for which we may feel that we're overqualified. I mean, do you think God ever asks you to do things that are below you? But God, I can do this. Yes, but I need you to do this. I need you to do that. Matthew chapter 25 and verse 40, it says, the king will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me. That verse sound familiar to you? You know where that comes from? Yeah, Matthew 25, I understand. That's the great judgment scene when the sheep and the goats are being separated. And Jesus is talking about how you saw me hungry, you fed me. You saw me thirsty, you gave me drink. You saw me naked, you clothed me. You saw me sick, you ministered to me. You saw me in prison, and you come to visit me. I mean, you look at that list, and there's not a thing on that list that none of us couldn't do. I mean, we can do that for our people around us. We can feed them, we can give them drink, we can clothe them, we can minister to them. When they're sick, we can visit them. When they're in prison, there's nothing there that we can't do. And so when Jesus looked at the sheep and said, enter in to the rest that's been provided for you. And they're like, what did we do? When did we ever do this? See, they lived ministry as a lifestyle. That's what they did. They didn't think of it as doing jobs beneath them. They saw a need and they met it. But the goats on the other side, they too said, when, Lord? When did we ever see you like this and not do it? And he said, if you saw it and didn't do anything about it, you didn't do it for me. Why didn't they do it? Well, they probably thought they were better trained to do greater things. You know, it's really difficult to do great things until you do little things. Until you do little things. The chase is unsuccessful. So here's this powerful young man and a servant chasing donkeys, but everywhere they go, They can't find the donkeys. Again, 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 4, so they passed through the hill country of Ephraim, through the area around Shalisha, but they did not find them. They went to the district of Shalim, but the donkey was not there. The donkeys were not there. Then he passed through the territory of Benjamin, but they did not find them. Doesn't that get discouraging when you can't find what you're looking for? It does, doesn't it? Even if you're looking for something around the house and you can't find it, it gets discouraging. But here is Saul and this servant. I mean, they're traveling long distances to look for these donkeys, but they can't find them. Maybe you know how difficult this task is. When I was growing up, we had horses. My grandfather had cattle, and they would get out every now and again. And where do you go to look for them? I don't know. I don't think like a horse or a cow. You just got to go look. You got to go look until you find them. And then you have to go find out, how did they get out? So that means after you find them, you've got to go walk the fence line and find out what the problem is. It can be frustrating, especially when you spend all day looking for what's lost. At this point, Saul begins to compare values. He's looking at himself as the son, and then looking at the donkeys. You know, remember, donkeys aren't very valuable, especially to a family like Saul's. And so in 1 Samuel chapter 9 and verse 5, it says, when they reached the district of Zuph, Saul said to the servant who was with him, come, let us go back, for my father will stop thinking about the donkeys and start worrying about us. He's thinking, we've been gone for such a long time that my father's going to think something happened to us. And we're far more valuable than the donkeys. And so he's comparing the value. Which is more important? I mean, they have been searching already for 2 or 3 days. And friends, let me tell you, the land of Zuph is where many of us end up in life. This is where preachers and teachers suffer burnout. I've put everything into it. I'm trying to convince people. I'm trying to get an amen. And nobody will answer. We're in the land of Zuph. I'm ready to give up. I'm ready to stop. I am so disappointed. When you reach this point, it's where you feel like your dreams of life have crashed. They've died. It's where you feel like you no longer have purpose. Zuph actually means dripping honeycomb. So you'd like to think that when you reach the land of Zuph, you've made it. But many of us, like Saul, when we reach the land of Zuph, we find nothing but stinging bees when we get there. Because we're discouraged. Things aren't going the way we think they should. Things aren't going the way we envisioned them. Instead of giving up, the servant presents an idea. And sometimes that's what we have to think about. Sometimes when we're ready to give up, sometimes somebody else has an idea. And so the servant, in verse 6, the servant replied, look, in this town there is a man of God. He is highly respected, and everything he says comes true. Let's go there now. Perhaps he will tell us what way to take. Friends, this is the greatest advice ever. You don't ever go wrong asking God. Ever. I mean, have you ever found yourself, well, I'm not going to go to God for this. He don't care. Yes, He does. You are His child. And He loves you. Nothing's too small or below Him. He wants to hear your wants, your needs. He wants you to know that you need Him. And He wants to bless you. There's nothing that God can't accomplish. I've heard people talk about things and say, well, God doesn't care about that. That's not important to God. Friends, if it's important to you, it's important to God. Because you are His child. And so the servant tells Saul, let's go see. Let's go see this man of God. But Saul's worried because traditionally, when you go to the seer, as they call him, you have to take something. You have to present him with a gift. You have to give him some sort of offering. Saul says, we got nothing to take him. We've got nothing. And so the servant once again has the answer. He says, look, I have 1/4 shekel of silver, and I'll give it to the man of God, and he will tell us what way to take. He says, look, this is all I got in my pockets, but if it'll help us accomplish what we need to accomplish, I'll give it to him. Another answer. But again, it's let's turn to God. Often, as we are out chasing donkeys, it's putting us in the right place at the right time. I mean, we've all heard stories about people missing the boat, but there's also people that receive or catch the boat because they're in the right place at the right time. And when we're out chasing our donkeys, this can often put us in contact with servants of God, people who can direct us, people who can help us, people who can encourage us. Saul was encouraged to go seek out the prophet of God. And so they go into the town and they're seeking the prophet of God. And they run into a young woman at the well drawing water. And she says, well, he's down the road. And she directs him to his house or where he's staying. And so they go down there. Saul, still not convinced this task is worth it. He's still not sure that this task that has been assigned to him really means anything. But as I said, to God, what we do is important. He wants us to give it our best, no matter what. Because nothing is below us. Everything we do, think about it, has a purpose. You ever think of that? Everything I do has a purpose. Why? Because it's going to affect something else that I do. The things you do, the things you say, they're going to affect everybody around you in some way, somehow. You may not think it's much. I remember when I was a young preacher and I wasn't even preaching full time. I had preached a sermon and I made a comment that it's not my responsibility to please you. My responsibility is to step on your toes and to please God. And I never thought any more about it till about a week later, one of the young men that was in the congregation come up to me and said, "That had an impact on me. I'd never thought about that." He said that your responsibility is virtually to make me uncomfortable so I grow closer to God. And that was just a comment that was pulled out. I didn't think it was going to have a deep spiritual meaning to anybody. Nor is about, if you don't like my preaching, too bad. As long as God likes it, that's all I'm worried about. And that's where we need to be, because we want to be pleasing to God. But yet we have to have this attitude of everything I do is going to draw me closer to God. It's going to affect those around me. But these little tasks, they have purpose. Remember what Jesus said in Mark chapter 9, verse 41. "Whoever gives you a cup of water to drink because of your name as followers of Christ, truly I say to you, he will not lose his reward." I thought about that when we was in Tennessee. Tammy and I one day was leaving the house, and we looked down this long driveway across from the house, and we saw smoke coming out of it. And we drove back there. Sure enough, the house was on fire. And so we come back up, we called the fire department, and it happened to be the sister of one of our members' house that was burning, and they had a cabinet shop right up on the other behind our house. And so we went up and got her. Well, the fire department came, and Tammy and I spent the afternoon filling the 5-gallon water coolers at our house and bringing them back to put in their refresher station. And after it was all over, they come over and said, "You guys were so valuable in this." We didn't do anything. They said, "You don't know how much that means to a guy coming out of fire to be able to get cold water." Didn't think of it that way. All I was doing was running back and forth. But see, that's what we needed to do at that time. That was our lot, was to supply them with something they may need. Saul and the servant find the man of God. Ask yourself, was chasing donkeys part of God's plan for Saul? Sure it was. Verses 15 and 16. "Now the day before Saul came to the Lord, the Lord revealed this to Samuel. About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin, anoint him leader over my people Israel." Because Saul was out chasing donkeys, he became king. He became the king of Israel. What if he had decided not to go? What if he had said, "I'm not going to do this, I'll just get some of the servants to go"? But God had a plan. God said, this will be the time that he is anointed. You know, we don't always see God's plan in our actions. It's not always about how extraordinary our service is. It's about being obedient to God and allowing him to use us and to put us in the proper places. I mean, maybe throughout your life you've had jobs that you didn't like, but they led to something greater. They led to something bigger. And I'll guarantee you learned something from them, didn't you? You learned something that is helping you today. But I want you to remember that Saul was ready to give up and return home. Saul was done. Until the servant said, "Let's seek out the man of God." Saul was brought to Zuth by God for a reason. 1 Samuel chapter 10 and verse 1, it says, "Then Samuel took the flask of oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, 'Has not the Lord anointed you leader over his inheritance?'" Yeah, it was a meaningless job. It was a menial task. But it led to Saul being anointed king. It put him in the place where he needed to be to receive what some might say was his calling, to be the first king of Israel. Think about that. Think about how important that is. Listening and being obedient leads to great things. We may not see it at the time, but believe me, they lead to great things. Friends, I know we often want to pick and choose what we want to do in service to God. But sometimes God calls us to chase donkeys. He calls us to do that task. Maybe we don't see the significance of going to visit someone. Maybe we don't see how taking food to someone will affect them. Or just sitting down with someone to be with them so they won't be lonely. Or even just giving someone a cold cup of water. But in God's eyes, that's a wonderful service. It's a great thing that you do. Maybe you don't realize God's plan for your life. I don't care how old you are, God still has plans for you. God's still got directions for you to go. Listen. Maybe you're at your zuff. Don't give up. Go on in and search out God's direction, because He has a plan for you. And He will help you in any way to accomplish whatever He has decided you need to do. But you just have to trust Him. Just have to listen. And He'll take you, and you will accomplish great things. If you're here today and you've never been baptized for remission of sins, God has a desire to save your soul. And so He asks you to be obedient. Be immersed for remission of sins. And you too will accomplish great things, because that's a great thing in itself. Christian, maybe you're at your zuff. You need to decide what to do. Do you want to quit? Do you want to go in and seek God's Word? Seek His direction. Maybe you're here today and you need the prayers of the church. Maybe for encouragement. Maybe for a physical ailment. Something spiritual. Church would be glad to pray for you. So I want you to seek out one of the elders or myself to ask for those prayers, and we'll be more than welcoming to you to help you overcome whatever it is you're facing. Think about that as we stand and as we sing.